Yeah, you and me will.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
right.
okay.
This is Jim Siebold. It's June 10th, 1990. Jack, could I have your full name, please?
Jack Seidner,
Your date of birth?
July 12, 1921.
Your place of birth?
Lujan. It's North Bukovina. It's a part of Romania in that time.
Could you please spell Lujan?
L-U-J-A-N, or in Romanian it's spelled L-U-J-E-N-I.
The name of your spouse?
Sarah.
The date and place of your marriage?
It was August 31st, 1945 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia.
Your father's name?
Late.
The date and place of your father's birth, if you can recall
Well,
that?
it's Lujan too.
Lujan, okay.
Yeah. Well, he was 65 at the time of his death. That was in 1941, so I think
So,
he was born in the
1486?
86, something like that.
Something like that.
Right.
Ballpark.
Right.
Your mother's
Shandel,
and her place of birth.
Sadagura.
Any rough? That's Austria.
It's next to Chernovitz. That was still Austria at that time when she was born. Right.
And what her age?
Her age, she was about 5 years younger than my father.
Okay.
So it would be in 1890, something
91
like that.
maybe?
91, something.
Her occupation.
Housewife.
Okay. And the name of your children and their ages right now?
Well, Leo is 44, Janice is 39, Betty is 31, Sammy is 30, and Helen is, she was born in 63, so she would be 27.
27.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
Maybe we could begin, Jack, for you just describing for us a little bit about the town, that Lujan, where you lived in.
Lujan was a little rural area, a farm town. My father used to peddle. I used to go from little town, with a horse and buggy, selling shoes. I was born and raised there. I went through public school there. High school we couldn't afford. High school was expensive. You had to pay for it.
Were you a poor family? Would you?
Well, I was never hungry. Let's put it that way. We were not rich, but I had everything what I needed. We were all right, but not to be able to pay for higher education. It was not possible. In those days, it was not easy, and it was very expensive too. And naturally, a Jewish boy, when he was 13, you became a man. And in those days, if you didn't further your education, you went to work.
One way or another.
So I went from Lujan, I went to Chernovitz, the big city.
At what age?
At 13. And I was an apprentice in a store for 3 years. That's how the system worked, And I worked for 3 years, no wages.
Who did you live with?
I lived with some family there, and I had a brother there, my older brother. He used to help me pay for my food and lodging. And after 3 years, you had to go through the Chamber of Commerce and put up an exam and become a full-fledged salesman. And I was doing all right.
And then sales is what you were being trained in?
Yeah, that was the system in those days. And it was considered a very good job in those days. It was paid very well, yeah. And I was doing pretty good. And in 1940, the Russians came in. They occupied the North Bukovina and Bessarabia in that time. And they were there about a year.
This is a year after the occupation of Poland by the Germans.
Right.
And Germany.
The Russians came in. At that time, King Karl was the king of Romania. And somehow they made a deal and they gave that part, North Bukovina and Bessarabia, they gave it to the Russians. So when they came in, I went from Chernovitz back home to that little town to my parents. I stayed with
For
them.
all that time you had been in the larger town.
Right. And naturally, in Russia in those days, you had to work. If you didn't work, that meant that you were doing some commerce, or it was illegal. You had to have a job. So I was working in a alcohol factory, and then I changed and I worked in a. We had the alcohol factory in that little town, and we had the sugar factory. And in June of 1941. The Russians left and the Germans came in.
Let me ask you before you go on to that. How many Jews were in your town?
About 100 families.
100 families. In the total population?
About 3,000.
About 3,000.
Yeah.
What was life like for Jews in this town before the?
It was not bad. It was not bad. It was who was in power. It was. If we had the right person in power, it was okay. If we had the right, sometimes it happens. If the sermon was okay, if the people went to church Sunday morning and the preacher forgot about Jews, it was okay. If he didn't forget about Jews, it was a little trouble.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Was there much discrimination?
Only where education was considered. Education. To become a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, it was very hard in those days because you had a quota.
Yes.
Certain, they allowed a minimum, and naturally you had to be pretty wealthy to be able to do it, to get into, especially to college.
Right, right.
In those days, and.
But there was synagogue, there was open synagogue.
Sure. When I was in public school and when we had the national holiday, and when we were marching from school, the Christians went to church and we went to the synagogue. I mean, you made a prayer for the king or whoever it was, or the president or whatever it was, and it was all right. There was no. We had religious hours in school. And the Jews were excused for that hour.
Is that right?
Yeah, we walked out, we played in the yard, and after the hour we came back to school.
So
class. Oh yeah, it was.
I think you have a picture of your family.
Yeah,
Maybe you could show those at this point.
Oh yeah. I was lucky. I had an uncle here, and he had that picture, and he gave it to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it. That's my father.
Okay, turn it a little bit towards the. There you go.
That's my father, my mother, my two older brothers, and that's me when I was 8 years old. Yeah. And then I have a picture of my grandmother.
This is your mother's mother?
That's my mother's mother, yeah. The other one I don't have. Yeah. When her husband died, she lived with us for a little while.
Tilt it this way a little bit.
She died of natural causes.
She did?
Yeah. Now my parents, actually, when the Germans came in June, dates I don't remember, in June of 1941, before they came into that little town, we had a river, it's called the Prut, P-R-U-T, big river. So all the Jews from that little town went to hide. I don't know what they call it, but big grass is growing around the water, tall.
Right.
And we were all hiding there.
This was in anticipation of the Germans?
Yeah, they supposed to come in, and we left the house. Everybody left their homes, and we stayed there for 3 days. And eventually we had to, how long can you stay there? But when we got back to our homes, the house was empty. Nothing was left. The population, went and just rampaged. They took everything. You couldn't find a cup to have a drink of water.
Who took the stuff?
The population.
The population. These were your neighbors.
Yeah, neighbors. Sure. We had a guy who used to work for my father, and he came over and he said, "Look, in order everybody gonna drag in, let me take it in case everything all right. You know where it is." So
right.
he took everything. But when we came back, so the Romanians in that time, they took all the Jews to that sugar factory. It didn't work in that time, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the war started. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks.
Hiding?
No,
No?
in the sugar factory.
Why in the sugar
They took
factory?
us over there. They took all the Jews.
Why not back to your homes?
There was nothing in the homes. See, they didn't leave us, and they didn't let us go to the home. They took us all together. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks. Then they took us all together again, and they marched us over the Polish border. The Polish border was about 30 kilometers, not far.
These are the town officials that are doing, making these
And
decisions?
there came an order from Bucharest, from the government. And that time it was Antonescu. I don't know if you heard
No.
at that time.
No.
Yeah, he was King Michael. He lives in Switzerland.
So.
Yeah, he thought he gonna go back now and become king
Yeah,
of Romania.
there's a lot of
he
them
would
going
like
back.
to, yeah, but it
How
didn't work.
are the people feeling as they're getting marched around? What is the thinking?
Well, some people, you have neighbors, and I never felt a stranger in that little town. I never felt any anti-Semitism. I never felt it. I never felt it. As a kid, with the kids in school, when, you know, oh yeah, you always heard, you know, I mean, go to Palestine, go there, go here, go there. You heard that, but you didn't pay, it didn't bother you. That was a natural thing, you know. You lived with it every day, and it didn't bother you. But as a whole, we didn't have any trouble. As a whole, we didn't have. But and that time when they marched us to the border, to the Polish border, they arranged for the elderly people to have horse and buggies. So I managed to put my father on one of them and my mother on another one, and we couldn't follow them. The young people, they marched in front, and the horse and buggies were in the back. Horse and buggies. So I managed to put my father on one of them and my mother on another one, and we couldn't follow them. The young people, they marched in front, and the horse and buggies were in the back.
And this is you and your two brothers, or
No, my brother, the Russians took him with them.
Oh.
See, when they left,
Yes.
they took him with them. Somehow I couldn't do it. I was young in that time. I was younger, you know.
They took him to be a
They took him for
soldier.
work, not soldiers. They didn't trust him. No, not as soldiers, but as workers. He was in Sverdlovsk, so for 4 years.
Okay.
And then he went to Israel from there. But anyway, I put my father on my wagon and my mother on the wagon, and we were going all night. And early in the morning, when dawn, you know, about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, we were over the border. And I was going through and to see where my parents were. And I haven't seen them since. 2 couples disappeared. My mother and my father and another couple. And from that group. And I've never seen them since then.
No clue.
No clue. I don't know what happened to them.
And so now you're alone. Now all.
Now I'm alone, strictly alone.
How's that feeling? I mean, is this terrifying?
Well,
Is this terrifying?
I tell you what, in a situation like that, you become so hardened
Yeah.
that actually nothing bothers you.
Yeah.
You cannot cry.
Yeah.
I couldn't shed a tear.
Yeah.
I sit today and watch television, and if it's too dramatic, I start crying.
Yeah.
And my family looks at me, hey, you must be crazy. But subconsciously, you know what I mean? I start crying. And during that time, I couldn't do nothing. But anyway, we stayed there. It was Saturday. The city was Kolomea.
This is Poland.
In Poland. And the Hungarian army was there because they were with the Germans. And every Jewish house had a Star of David, but they were still home. And the rabbi of that town told the people to, they call it in Yiddish, B'chal Shabbat, to cook on Saturday to give us food. So in the meantime, they received the order from Bucharest that they should send us back.
Why did they send you to begin with?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? They want to get rid of us. They didn't want us. The Germans didn't want us there. The Hungarians didn't want us there. The Poles didn't want us there. So they sent us back. We came back, and we were there about another 2 or 3 weeks. And then they started again, and they marched us all the way from the Bukovina through Bessarabia all the way to the Dniester. That's a water, which is the border Dniester. It is the border from the Romanian side to the Russian side.
And this is still your town people that are marching
yeah,
in?
Yeah. And they marched us, and every day people just dropped. The elderly people, you know, I mean, it was hot, it was in the summertime. No food, no water.
Why are you being treated this way by your own countrymen?
They said that we deserve it.
Oh, really?
And we don't deserve a bullet because we're going to die anyway.
So this is the country that had been very non-discriminatory. Now it's changing dramatically.
It changed because the climate was entirely different.
Sure.
See?
Sure.
So they marched us for 3 months. And from that group, I had 5 uncles and 5 aunts in that group. They all died. They just dropped, and you left them there. I don't know what happened to them, if they buried them or not. We had to keep on going. The younger people survived. Because at night, I used to sneak out in a garden and eat, you know, vegetables, fruit, whatever I could find, you know, and that's what kept me going. But anyway, that was going on for 3 months.
You were not being fed?
No.
At all?
No food.
Literally?
Literally no food.
And were these soldiers, by the way, or
soldiers?
These
Romanian soldiers. Romanian soldiers. Then finally they brought us to a place. It was called Jedinec, a little town surrounded with barbed wire, an open space, and they kept us in there. Still no food, no water. I had to sneak out at night and get me some food.
Were you afraid at all?
No.
Just one feeling a lot.
Because you didn't know what happened. You know, every second was, you know, you just let it go. In case, you know, in case of outside.
Were you hearing at all about what was happening to Jews in other countries? Any rumors at all?
No, and that time we knew what was going on in Poland.
What had you heard?
We knew that they were not out that time. Some of them in certain cities they were still home in 41. But in deeper Poland, they were taken away in 39 and 40.
So you were aware that you as a Jew...
We were aware. We didn't know exactly what was happening, but more or less we knew that it didn't smell right.
To put it mildly. Huh?
It wasn't right. It wasn't right. But at least we were lucky in one way. The Ukraine was split. Half was Germans, half was Romanians. But the Germans were there too, but it was Romanian territory. And the Romanian told Hitler, Michael told Hitler that his Jews are his deal, not whatever he wants to do with them, you know, I mean, it's his deal, and he let them be. Now, those Jews who got in on the German side never came back. See?
Gotcha.
Now those Jews who were lucky and were on the Romanian side had a chance to survive. I was in that part.
You were with the
on the Romanian side. But the Germans, if they were asking for people for work, they had to give it to them.
What was the political relationship between Romania and Germany at this
They
point?
they had a pact.
They had a pact.
Sure. It was Germany, Romania, Italy, you know, the Axe, the German Axe, they called it that time. But anyway, after 3 months, they took us over the Dniester on the Ukrainian side. And they took us about, I would say, about 120 kilometers from the city was Mogilev-Podolsk, the border city on the Ukrainian side.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, they marched us about another 120 kilometers.
Still the Romanians.
The Romanians. And they, you know, they call, in Russia, they call them kolkhoz, collective farms.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time,
Mm-hmm.
it was gone. So they
Mm-hmm.
took out the cows and the horses from a barn, and they throw us in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And they put 50 people in this town, 100 people in this town, 50 people in this town, from all over the Bukovina and Bessarabia.
Are you by
And
yourself?
it was called, I was by myself, and it was called Transnistria. Transnistria, you know, over the Dniester.
Mhm.
That's what it was
Mhm.
called, Transnistria. And now those people who came from the big cities with families, they still have, when you were taken on the German side to work, you never came back. So
Well-
long you were working on the Romanian side, you had a chance to survive.
This is Jim Siebold, June 9th, 1990, with Jack Seidner. What were you were saying that the people who were able to work, they were able to live well.
Ah.
But you with-
I was not a barber. I was not.
You were, yeah, you were a
So
sales.
what happened? There were no men. All the men the Russians took with them, the Ukrainians. So there were only women. The German army needed bread, so they forced the women to work the fields. So
The
women.
Romanians forced the
No,
Germans.
the Germans.
Oh, now we have the Germans.
Oh, sure, they were there too.
I see.
Oh, yeah, sure. But they were asking the women, the farmers, you know, came to those barns and were asked who wants to go to work. Well, I volunteered because I had to eat. So we used to work in the fields, and they used to feed us, see. And finally, I started walking around, going from one place to the other. I saved a lot of people. I used to carry letters. If I found out, for example, that you have a brother 100 kilometers from there, you want him, I went there and I used to bring him back.
How did you save people?
I used to walk at night. I had a friend of mine, he was a dentist, and he was with his mother. And his mother died. And he sat down on the floor with his leg under his, you know, and he was sitting on a sweater. And I swear to God that every hole in the sweater had a louse. That sweater was moving with him, see? And when I saw that, I picked that guy up, carried him on my shoulders, that high snow, it was in the wintertime, carried him to a little town that was called Kopygorod. And it was a room, transient room, where people used to come, you know, and sleep over the night and go on further. And I took him over there, and there were still some Russian people, Russian Jewish people there left. And somehow they had pity on that fellow, and they took him in their house, and they cleaned him up, and they fed him. And there was out of the ghetto, there was a Jewish dentist, and he took him in for work. And whenever I used to come to that town, he used to treat me royal, you know. I saved that guy's life. And I saved a lot of people like that. I saw a little girl, her parents died. And I knew that her uncle is doing very well. He was a an interpreter between the Germans and the Romanians at the border. And he lived very good. I didn't ask him any question. I took that girl, you know, and walked 3 nights and brought her home and saved her. See? She survived. But anyway, that was going on from 41 till 44.
And this was in the Ukraine.
That was in the Ukraine.
And this was in the Romanian occupied area of Ukraine.
Right. But the Germans were there too.
But the Germans. How were you able to get so much access?
I was walking. I took chances. I was by myself. I had nothing to lose. I didn't wear the star.
You did not wear the
front
star.
and not on the back. They knew who I was anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people.
And that's right. You would be
when I met a soldier, I was in trouble. But somehow, you see, today I believe 100% in destiny.
Mm-hmm.
If your destiny is not to die, you can go through hell and nothing's going to happen to you. I used to soldiers and they used to find the letters. You know, they used to. That was against the law, you know.
These were the Romanian soldiers.
Yeah, but somehow I always got out of it alive. See? I always got out of it alive. I was lucky somehow.
Any encounters with Germans at the time?
Yeah, too. But I was lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow I was lucky. I was walking one time on a highway, and I had a friend of mine, and there was a sergeant and a soldier in a horse and buggy, and he shot him. I didn't know. When he got to me, he took the whipped the horse and whipped me as we run with the horses, and left me and didn't bother me. See? So my time was not.
My goodness.
My time was not up. See?
No.
But anyway, it was going on till 1944. 44, I went to a city, Murafa, and I went in every city, every little town. The Germans and the Romanians had a Jewish police. If they needed something, they went through them.
This was
If
every
they
town.
said-
Every town had one of these.
Every town. Every town. So I walked into the Jewish police station, and I asked them I would like to have a place where to stay overnight. So they sent me somewhere. There was a Russian Jew, had a little room. There were 10 people in there. He had one bed, slept with his wife. People slept on the table, under the table, on benches, and they put me in there too. The same day, the Germans were asking for every man to work. They got every man, and anybody who still had something to pay off got up. It was 10 o'clock in the evening, and there was one lady, she had a son, 18 years of age, and she was looking for a replacement. So the police station, one guy said, hey, I sent a guy there, you know, and they came over, and she gave me 300 German mark and a pair of shoes.
To take her son's place.
And the son was out, and I was in, and that was the first time they laid a hand on me after almost 4 years. I was able to always stay away from
Right. I'm curious that you took the deal.
I didn't want to fight it. I said, I did it for 4 years. My time came. We'll see what's going to happen. I could have escaped. I had chances, but I didn't. And they put us in trains, and they took us close to the front. And it was a town. It was called Kolosovka.
And which front are we talking about?
The Russian front. And that little town had, the population was all German. They came after World War I and they settled down there. And they all spoke German. And we slept in the railroad, in those freight wagons, and we had a stove. It wasn't the winter.
How many are there?
Oh, we were several hundred. And I was detailed to work You know, in those days we had water pumps for the locomotives. There was no diesel in that time, you know. There was old-fashioned, you know, especially in Russia, you know, they didn't have it. And we were built those water pumps for the locomotives at the railroad station. And I had a foreman. He was from Sudetengebiet. He was from, you know, Sudeten is in Czechoslovakia. It's a German. Remember Hitler wanted that annexed in the beginning, and they gave it to him too. But anyway, he was a very nice guy. He used to give us chocolate. He used to give us cheese. He used to give us bread. But he said, what can you do? He wants to destroy you. But anyway, one day he sent me to pick up pipe, you know, elbow.
Yes. This was an Aryan German that you're talking
No,
about?
that was in Ukraine. That was still there. But I was detailed there. When they caught me in that little town in Morava, they sent me to work. And I didn't have any power in my hands. And when I picked that thing up, I dropped it in the middle of the railroad like this, you know. And the locomotive came and hit it. And the big guy from the railroad station was a SS guy. He was 8 feet tall. He was so tall, and he came running and pulled out the pistol, and he told me that I'm a saboteur, you know, from the German Reich, you know. But my foreman saw it, what happened. He came running and explained it, that it happens, you know, I mean, it just fell off my hand. I didn't do it because I'm a saboteur. And he saved me. He put the pistol back in his holster and left me. When the front started coming closer and closer, they put us in trains and freight wagons, and the front half the train was freight, half was passenger wagons. And they were German soldiers, Ukrainians who were working with the Germans, and they were trying to leave the Ukraine because they were scared the Russians gonna.
We're in the Ukraine at this point now, and then the Germans, the Russians are coming closer and closer.
That's right. So we stopped about 8 kilometers from Odessa, and we heard noises, airplane noises, but the Germans were calm because the noise was Messerschmitts, German Messerschmitts. But when they came closer, the pilots were Russians, see? And they hit all the passengers. They made a bloodbath. They made a bloodbath out of there. But they tried to hit, there was a big train with ammunition going towards the front, behind our train. They tried to get that one. But when they did that to our train, they didn't bother the freight train. They knew who we were, somehow, I did. And we ran, and we were hiding in the fields.
Now we is who?
We were several hundred people, see?
Okay.
They tried to take us to Germany in that time, see?
I'm sorry, no, I don't.
Yeah.
At what point did they try to?
At that point, we were...
Okay. They were taking you back from the front back into Germany.
Into Germany.
And you were at Odessa.
When that happened, we ran out of the train, and we were hiding about a day. In the evening, we went back towards the railroad, but the train was already gone. They had to clean it up, and we walked on the railroad to Odessa.
This is this whole group of people?
Yeah. And
what country is Odessa?
Odessa is the Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a big city, nice city, at the Black Sea. Beautiful city, big city. And we went to the Romanian police, and they put us for the night in jail to sleep. And the next morning, they took us over the border on the Romanian side.
You weren't afraid of the Romanian police?
Well, they were a little mellower because they knew already what's going on. The Germans are almost lost, you know, I mean, so they were not that harsh. And when we came on the other side, there were a Jewish delegation from the Joint Distribution Center, and they bought us tickets wherever we wanted to go.
But when they took you into Romania, you were met by a Jewish delegation.
Yeah. We were met there. They gave us clothing. They gave us food. They gave us tickets. They bought us tickets.
Let me ask you a question, a general question.
Yeah.
Romania, were there ghettos in Romania?
No.
The Jews were not treated...
In Romania, they were taken to work.
Right.
Some people.
Right.
But they were not sent out. They were in their homes.
Were any of the Romanians allowed?
There was trouble in certain cities. A lot of people were killed. See?
Pogrom type of things?
But they were not taken out of their homes.
And were any sent to concentration camps?
They were not sent to concentration camps.
Okay.
Only the part where I come from, in Bessarabia, they did that only because we were occupied from the Russians. That was the only reason they did that to us.
And they marched you?
That's right. That was the only reason. They took us out from our homes.
Had you been in another part of Romania, you would have been staying.
I would have been, yeah. If I would be from Romania,
gotcha.
It would have been all right.
So now you have this Jewish delegation actually is in existence, and they're coming and they're going to support you. They're going to help you.
They came and they gave me a ticket, so I took a ticket to go to Chernobyl, to go home.
Mm-hmm.
But it was too late. The Russians were already there, so I stopped in the city that's called Yassi.
The occupying Russians are already in your hometown?
Yeah, in Chernobyl.
In Chernobyl.
Yeah, the Russians were there already.
And you didn't want to go there because why? Why not?
I didn't want to go. I knew them already. I didn't want nothing to do with it.
You didn't like those people?
No, I didn't know.
Okay.
But anyway, we stopped in Yassi. And the Jews from that city were working for the Romanians and the Germans. So when we came, they said, well, we're going to feed you, and we're going to give you lodging, and you go to work, and we're going to stay home. So that would happen.
Wait, I'm sorry, you were then, instead of these other Jewish...
The local Jews changed with us.
Was this done nicely, or was there
It
some...
was done nicely. Well, I don't blame them. Look,
okay.
Nobody blamed them.
Okay.
So we made a second line. And the Russians were there surrounding that city about 3/4, like a boot.
Okay.
One area was out, free, but the rest of them, the Russians were staying there for 6 months. They didn't bother.
Why didn't they not occupy?
That was the deal.
Okay.
I don't know. They just didn't bother that area and that time.
This is 1944.
Yeah. And in August, we were 7 boys. We stayed together in Yassi. You know, in Europe, you have big buildings, and then you have a courtyard in the middle. And in that courtyard was a little synagogue. And I always used to say, if a bomb gonna fall 50 miles from that little synagogue, it's gonna collapse. And we slept there. In that little synagogue.
There were the 7 or 8 of you?
Yeah, the 7 boys. We stayed together. 7 boys, we stayed together. And one Easter, when the Allied troops made a push, you know, Romania had gas, Ploiești. They have a lot of natural gas there, and gas. So they tried to get that. They needed it, and they bombed that Ploiești, and they had the base there. And then they came to Yassi. 12 o'clock in the evening. They bombed that city from 12 to 3 o'clock in the morning without stopping. One group came, dropped the bombs, left, another group was there. And we were staying in that courtyard, and we felt, each time a bomb fell, we felt the current, you know, and we did like this, you know, nothing happened. And you know what? In the morning, 3 o'clock, exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, it stopped. The whole street was down, and that synagogue is still there. It's still there.
Talk about destiny, huh?
It's still there. And we survived. But anyway, then August the 20th, the Russians bombed the city, and they came down with parachutes. Now, I knew one thing, because I knew the Russians. If they come, there wouldn't be nothing to eat. So 7 of us, the minute we saw that the Russians are coming down, we went to the open market. And we, sacks of food, you know, we brought to that place where we stayed. So the whole families ate, you know, because I knew that nothing to do. We knew it, I knew it. But anyway, we stayed there, the Russians were there, but after 2 months I decided I want to go home.
Let me ask a question. How was it with Russians occupying?
And that time?
Yes, how'd they treat you?
They treated all right. And you see, in the beginning, when they came into us in 1940, the Russians came in with sacks of money because they couldn't spend it in Russia. They couldn't buy anything. When they came to us, they let us do the black market for 3 months. I made a lot of money. I used to deal and wheel with them, you know, like crazy. They spent that money, and there was anything they could lay their hand. But after 3 months, that was it. They said, that's it. If you do it, you go to jail. That was it. But for 3 months, and that's what they did there too. Wherever they came in,
they allowed it.
They cleaned out everything. They bought everything they could lay their hand on, you know. And then whatever was left, I was working in a store, in a piece goods store, inventory, and they took everything to Russia. You see what they're doing? They ruin a city. You take Nashville, for example. You take 5th Avenue. I give you the downtown, all right? Let's take the time when Monday night and Friday nights were open till 9 o'clock, see? Windows, beautiful clothing. Now when they came in, they took everything out. And they made one store in one corner, one store on another street with nothing, with buttons, with galoshes. They didn't have anything, see? It's the same thing like they say, what can we buy from? The only thing you can buy from them is vodka, caviar. What else? Nothing.
No.
Cigarettes they have dead alone. Half of them is empty and a little bit of tobacco. See? so that's staying there in trouble. See?
As a Jew, did it make any difference with the Russians?
In that time, no. In 1940, 41, Jews had very nice positions, big people. They were everywhere. They were in the army. They were everywhere.
How about in 44 now, as they're coming in?
After Hitler was there, he ruined it. See? After he just it changed. It changed, but not in 40. When they were there, it was not bad.
So when they came in now, when they were in their parachuting in 44, are you frightened as a Jew?
No. I went home.
It's June 10th, Jim Siebold interviewing Jack Seidner. So you're looking for your mother.
I decided to go home and see if somebody is alive. See.
You had no contact or heard nothing from them.
No, I didn't hear nothing. So when I came to Chernowitz, I've seen right away that I made a mistake. I haven't seen a young person around at all. And I knew if I'm going to go register to the police, they're going to take me. The war was still going on, and I was 20 years old, you know, and they'll take me. I survived Hitler 4 years. I didn't want to do it.
The Romanians would take you to...
No, the Russians.
The Russians would take you.
I went back. The Russians were already there. See?
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I decided that I don't want to go. After surviving for 4 years, the way I used to live those 4 years in the Ukraine is I used to spend in the summertime. I used to live in fields or on trees. I used to eat fruit. That what kept me going. Or I used to eat green peas, carrots. You know, in the wintertime was a little rough. I had to go on the fields. You know, they put their potatoes and their beets. They make a big hole in the field, and they keep it there for the wintertime, and it stays nice and fresh, and it doesn't freeze. See, I used to go and dig, you know, at night, so I can eat. You know, enough to eat. I used to go on Sunday. I used to look for weddings, you know. And yeah, and they used to feed me. See, and that's how I survived. The only thing was food. The main thing was food. If you got sick, you died. I lived in a place where they used to keep hay, and the people, the woman, used to let me sleep there.
Now, are you speaking now of being in the Ukraine?
In Ukraine, yeah.
And being Jewish.
Well, they knew they were Jews. See,
and that was,
they knew that was the deal. You know, the Germans got us, and they used to take us to work.
But people would allow you to sleep in their haystack or feed you at their wedding?
Some of them did,
would.
some of them not. Some of them did. Some of them, those people had a little, you know, they rented a house from him, or half of it, and they lived there, you know. Well, I was by myself. My body was so destroyed from lice that I didn't have one piece of my body that was not bitten, see? Because I never took a bath, and I slept with my clothing, and never had a pair of shoes for 4 years. I had rags around. I never had a shirt. I used to have a canteen and a piece of wire. You know, I used to sleep on the snow. It kept me warm, see. I didn't sleep in the house for 4 years because those people had families and they were clean and they didn't let me in, see, because I was filthy. But in the summertime, I used to lay down next to those little rivers, you know, little, what do you call it? Not a river, but small creeks. A creek. And I used to bathe in the summertime, it was fine, you know, but in wintertime it was a drought. But it was, and one day I got up and I had high fever, and the main guy from the community was a guy where I was born and raised. So he came over, and they took a horse and buggy, and they threw me in there, and they took me 30 kilometers to the city, to a hospital. And I had typhus, but I didn't know it. They didn't know it. And the guy who was supposed to drop me off in the hospital dropped me off in the old home. And those people started hollering. And it was winter time, it was snowing, and I had to get up. And I was walking around like in a dream. I didn't know where I was going. So a Ukrainian policeman, picked me up and took me to the Jewish Community Center. And I stayed there, and they took me to the hospital. And I waited for 3 days till the doctor came to see me. And he kicked me out. He said, we keep only healthy people here. See, all during that time, the sickness left me, and I got well.
So you were not...
But no doctor, with no medicine, with nothing, see. And I survived that I had the stomach typhus inside, you know.
So you were saying that you went back to look for your mother.
Yeah.
And you saw all the...
I didn't even recognize where the house was. And I was scared. I met that guy who took everything from our house.
Oh my.
And when I saw him on the fields, and I was by myself, and he was by himself, I said, uh-oh. I mean, that's going to be it. He might think I came, you know, I came for the... So he told me, look, if you're going to go in there, they'll pick you up, and they'll put you in the army. You better go back. And I listened to him. I went back to China. I had a friend of mine. We were between those 7 guys. And he met his wife. He found his wife and a little daughter. And I stayed with them. They had one room, and I stayed with them. So one day, they were at work. And a Russian policeman came into the house. And he asked me what I'm doing in daytime home. So I said, well, I'm working at night. In Russia, you have a piece of paper where you're employed. I didn't have any. So he took me to the police. If I would have anybody there or money, he would have taken it, you know. But I didn't have anything.
Is this still 1944?
That was 44. And he took me to the police station. And the police chief was a Ukrainian. The biggest mamzer you ever heard. They're was the biggest anti-Semites in the world. They're on the court. But anyway, he said, "Who's going to fight for you?" I said, "Well, if you want me to fight, I'm going to go fight." I said, "Look, I just got back. I survived Hitler. I didn't know what I have to do." He put me in jail, and the next day they took me to the penitentiary. And the minute you have trouble with the law in Russia, you have no rights. So when they took me, I had to stay with my face to the wall. I couldn't face people anymore. See? And he walked into the warden with a piece of paper what the police chief gave him, and he didn't want to accept me. So they took me back to the police station, and he got mad. And he wrote another letter, and the next morning they took me in. And I stayed there for 6 months.
This was a prison that the Russians were running for their people.
Yeah. There were a lot of Ukrainians, there were a lot of people who made themselves older so they wouldn't be eligible for war anymore, so forth.
And your crime was
and
that you...
my crime was, I didn't have a crime. My crime was I didn't go and register.
Didn't register, didn't work.
You know. But anyway, I stayed there for 6 months, and one day they opened the gate, and they let me out, and they took me to a place where they went through my case. You know, and there was a captain sitting there, and some military people, and he asked me what happened and this and that. And he says, "Now that you had a chance, you came to Russia, and you had a chance to fight the Nazis, what they did to your people and what they did to your parents, and you're hiding out." I said, "I didn't hide out." Anyway.
This had nothing to do with being a Jew.
No.
Anybody would have...
No, anybody. No, it had nothing. No, nothing to do with it. No, absolutely. And they took me to the recruiting center. And I was sitting there, and a guy came in with a little goatee, a Russian, and I heard he's asking for 2 people. He needs 2 people for work. And he told him to wait. So I walked over to him. I spoke a little bit Russian, words. And I asked him, "I heard that you looking for worker." I said, "How about take me?" He says, "What can you do?" I said, "Anything you want me to do." So he took me out, and he took another guy out. And he showed us where we have to go to work. And he said, "Go home and clean yourself up." And I went back to my friend there, took a shower, cleaned up a little bit. And the next morning I started going to work. So my work was black labor on a truck to carry, move furniture and this and that and that. So finally, in that time, after a few months, Stalin gave an order that all the foreigners can leave. Everybody who is not from
This is 1945 now?
No, still 44.
Still 44.
Oh, yeah. Can leave. So I went and registered that I am from Bucharest. Okay? But how that thing worked is that when you registered, and the place had 2 windows. When they called your name, when you said yes, you had to go to the next window. You had to give them a release from your job. Then they gave you the piece of paper that you can leave. I went to my director where I worked. He was a Gruzin. He was from the same place where Stalin came.
A Gruzin?
Gruzin. Yeah.
What?
That was one of the republics in Russia.
I see.
Yeah. And I told him, "Hey, look, the war Stalin gave a gave an order, and I want to leave. Give me." He said, "No." I said, "What do you mean no?" He says, "Where you want to go?" I said, "I'm going to Bucharest." He said, "We're going to be there pretty soon. So why you have to leave?" He didn't want to give them. So all the people who registered to leave were scared, because when the Russians came into us in 1940, Every night people disappeared. If you were a merchant, they took you away. If you were a worker, if you could show that your hands are hard, that didn't bother you. The minute your hands were smooth, you were out, mister. You were gone. And they used to take people, so people used to register for 10, 15 names. They were scared they're going to come and pick him up. They didn't trust him, see? So after 3 or 4 months, those people had, you know, papers like stacks of paper, and those people were already a long time gone. So they gave an order that one day they said, anybody, we're going to call your name. If you have paper, you don't have paper. If you're going to be there, you get your paper and you go. So I stayed there. You know, my name is Seidner, S is on the end. You know, I stayed all day long. Finally, they called my name, and he gave me that piece of paper. I didn't have any money. In Russia, the railroad stations are packed. When you walk, you have to go, you know. They're walking over people. They're laying and sleeping all over. And all the windows were closed. I had an uncle there. And I walked over to him and he gave me 100 rubles. And I went to the railroad station. And the ticket was 3 rubles. I knocked at the window. He opened it. I told him I won the ticket and I gave him the 100. And he gave me the ticket. And I went to the border. Well,
now which border?
The Romanian border. See? Over there, they checked your luggage, they checked everything, and they let you pass by. But they exchanged rubles for Romanian lei, for Romanian money. Well, I didn't have nothing, but people had some money. So one family said, look, 3,000 lei, I'll give you 1,500. Go and exchange it. I was happy. I exchanged that 1,500. I went over on the other side. I walked into a honky-tonk. Romania has a specialty. They call it mitite, carnați mitite. I still have that taste. I would like to eat it. You know, they have it in Israel. But I walked in there, and they had the dark beer and the gypsies with a violin, and I sat there, and that's not a lie. I didn't get out till I spent my last penny. I spent all the 50. I ate all night, and the gypsies were playing it. After that, I went to the railroad station and hitchhiked back to Yassi. I knew some people there. Stayed there for a while. Then went back to Bucharest, the capital of Bucharest. Over there, I went to, you know what hachshara means?
No.
When you go, it used to be to prepare you for a kibbutz, to live in a kibbutz. In Europe, we used to have hachshara. You used to go and work in fields, you know, and to get the feel of how it feels to work in the field. And they sent me to one of those. It was about 50 miles from Bucharest.
Who sends you?
Community sent me. So I can work in the fields and then go to Israel.
Were a lot of people going to Israel at that point?
Oh yeah.
Now what year
Some people went.
is this?
That was already early 45.
45. The
Yeah.
war is not quite yet over.
It was still going on around Berlin. See, and that time it was in Germany already. It was almost over. I was going there to hachshara, and I used to work for the Zionist organization. I used to shlichut. That means I used to go from country to country with papers, with certain things they had to be done.
At what point was this?
That was shlichut. They call it shlichut.
When?
In 45.
In 45. This is one of the things that you began to do for the Jewish community in Romania.
Right. I used to go to Yugoslavia. I went to Hungary. I went to several Eastern European countries.
And specifically, what were you doing?
I had a piece of paper. It was legal. In those days, the only way you could go is you came home from a concentration camp. See? And you had a piece of paper with a Star of David, and you You went, you know.
They would let you, give
They
you
didn't
free.
bother me. I go home, see? I had a paper. I am from Graz, Austria. I go through Budapest, see? And I did my stuff. Then Budapest gave me another piece of paper.
What stuff would you do?
I carried material, all kinds of different material. You know, it was sewed in my clothing. You know,
Material meaning
paperwork for the Haganah, for the Israeli. You know, it was going on at that time. It was big things going on.
My goodness.
Oh yeah.
Did you know what it was? The communications you were carrying?
No.
No.
It was put in, and I went there, and they took it, and then I went back. They gave me another piece of paper, and I went back wherever I had to go. Money too.
And you were going to different European countries with this.
I took a lot of dollars too. It was everything in my. But anyway, I did that for a while. Then my wife came into that Hachshara. My wife, her sister, 3 girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I met her that evening, and we talked about half a night. And I had to leave the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I left. And when I came back, she was already gone. She was gone. You heard when the trouble started in Romania, you heard a town, Timișoara, Temeswar.
Mm-hmm.
That's what started the trouble with the Hungarians and the Romanians. She was there.
Mm.
So I had to wait a few days, made me some papers, and I went down there, and I met her. She forgot already who I was. Then I asked her to marry me, see? She
Not
said, "You
taking much
crazy."
time, yeah.
But anyway, she left. The next morning, she went to Belgrade, Yugoslavia. So I had to wait another few days to make my papers, and I went to Belgrade, Yugoslavia. And in 2 weeks, we got married. That's how I married in Belgrade, Yugoslavia.
My goodness.
Yeah. And we stayed there for a while. We were not far from Tito. We
Mm-hmm.
stayed in the temple, big temple
Mm-hmm.
in Belgrade, big temple. I got married there. They gave me 1,000 dinars. There was about $5, I think. I bought that ring for 800,
Mm-hmm.
and 200 I spent for wine. And I had 10 people there, and they gave the tip, you know.
Mhm.
They got married there. Religiously. In Italy, then we went from there to Italy, and I lived in Italy for almost 10 years.
For what purpose Italy?
To go to Israel. See?
And
You
this-
had to go through some points.
Mm-hmm.
See, immigration to Israel was illegal that time. So they had to
What year?
45, 46 were illegal. You couldn't do it. So they smuggled you in there. See? It was a big operation. It was going, oh yeah, they did tremendous things.
Is that what your paperwork, when you were going back and forth, was for getting people in?
That was all kinds of things. But anyway, I did that, and we got married in Belgrade,
Right.
and we went to Italy.
Right.
Now my 2 kids, my oldest son Leo was born in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and Janice, my
Mm.
daughter, was born.
Mm-hmm.
My boy was here when I came to Nashville. He was about 8 years old, and my little girl was 3 years. And
Mhm.
I got 3 hillbillies. I got 3 born here in Nashville.
Now you were in Italy though, waiting to get into Israel. Is that
Then I
right?
changed my mind.
Oh.
See, I remember the address from my uncle in New York. And I wrote him a letter. I want an affidavit. So he sent me an affidavit.
What year?
In 1948, I think, 49.
Mhm.
But anyway, the Romanian quota was very small, and I couldn't get a visa. So finally, the United States recognized the area from where I come from as Russian.
Ah.
So they changed from Romanian quota to the Russian quota. It was still not enough. I waited 9 years, almost 10 years.
Is that ready?
Yeah.
This is Jim Siebold on June 10th, 1990, interviewing Jack Seidner. What changed your mind about Israel?
I'll tell you what changed my mind in Israel. In that time, they didn't have any housing. People lived in tents. I went through hell for so many years, and I wanted a home, and I wanted to sleep in a bed. And when I found out that I have a possibility to come to the United States, I just gave it up to go to Israel, and I emphasized my thoughts and everything to come to the United States. See? And I waited 9 years, and we made it.
And what was special about the United States? What was your idea of it?
Well, everybody knows that the United States is somehow heaven. I saw a play before I left Italy in Naples. I went to see a play where people say you come to the United States, you know, the trees, gold is hanging, and dollars are hanging. That's all you have to do is just lift, you know what I mean? And they showed how heavy, you know, you have to work to make the dollar, you know, you make a good play. It was really nice. So I knew exactly, you know. I used to ask people, when I found out I go to Nashville, the reason I came to Nashville is my wife had already a sister and a brother here. And they survived the Auschwitz together. And their mother told them always, stay together, don't part. So one went earlier. Her sister came here in 49. I came here in 54. And that's the reason we came to Nashville, because of her sister and her brother were here, and they were two survivors, and they wanted to be together, and naturally I came to Nashville, because people used to ask me, why Nashville?
Sure.
Why don't you go to New York,
Sure.
Los Angeles, Chicago?
How a good choice?
I used to, oh yeah, oh definitely. I used to ask, whenever I saw somebody speaking English, with my broken English, I used to ask them, soldiers I used to ask about Nashville, Tennessee. And they used to give me a bad picture. Small houses, green moss growing on the roofs, and goats are eating from it. But finally I got sick and tired of it. And I went in Rome and went to the American Embassy, to the library, and got me a book of Tennessee. I still have a notebook. I wrote down everything was going on. I knew more about Nashville than anybody who was born here. I knew everything was going on. I wrote everything down. I still have it. And Nashville is beautiful.
And you were received well?
Well.
You felt...
Oh yeah, very well. Very well. In the beginning, the Jewish Community Center did a lot for me. But I wanted to go to work. I was already sick and tired of doing nothing. And a guy wanted to give me a chance to become a jeweler, William S. Klein. And I worked for him for 3 years, but I was a ragman all my life, from 13, you know, it was in my blood. And I dropped it, and I started working here in the store. It was Bose Rosenblum, factory outlet. I don't know, Hershey Katzman, you know, Hershey Katzman. Worked with them. And then I went on my own, and I had a business on my own. Now I'm retired. I got 5 wonderful children.
How do you feel about your story?
Well, I was lucky. I was lucky, and I had a tremendous drive to survive. I did everything. A lot of people gave up. A lot of people died. And naturally, elderly people couldn't make it. There's no way they could make it. Those marches, you know, killed them. They dropped like flies. I was in my 20s. I was young, you know, and only young people survived. And the same way in the concentration camp. So long they were able to work, they had a chance to survive, see? The minute you got sick, they eliminated you. They didn't want to feed you. And the same way was there. And I was fighting it. I did everything just to eat, see? And if I had food enough, and I was lucky, whenever I was in trouble, I got out of it, you know? And that for 4 years, you know, sicknesses, I got through that. Soldiers, I got through that. I was happy I saved a few young people in my lifetime because of me they're alive.
Does the story bring up emotion in you at all as you tell it?
Today,
Yes.
it happened 50 years ago, and believe it or not, sometimes I think, how in the world can a human being or a human body go through it?
Mm.
I could eat nails. I went through a field with peeling from watermelon. The peeling, it tasted good.
Mm-hmm.
Never had a stomachache. Now I don't have a stomach. They had to take out my stomach. 2 years ago, they took out my stomach. See, with plenty food and good food. See, everything's fine. See? I went through about 5, 6 surgeries. In 4 years, I went through hell. Never had a sniffle.
Yeah.
Slept in the snow. No shoes on my feet. Never had a sniffle. Never had a cold. See? So it's destiny. It's destiny. I believe in it, 100%.
How about being a Jew and having been through this? Does it affect your feelings that way?
No.
No.
You see, I believe in it and I stick with it. I stay with where I was born and raised. I stay with Sheret Israel. I'm not a frum. I'm not a religious Jew, but I was brought up that way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel good down there, and I stay there. You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my kids are raised that way, and they are proud of it. They'll never deny it, you know. And I raised 5 good kids. We are happy.
Have your experiences affected how you've raised your children?
Yeah, in a way.
How would that be?
Yeah. And, well, my kids are very good-hearted. They're very emotional.
Very emotional.
Yeah. Very emotional.
Mm.
And but they're good. And it's all right. It's healthy. They can feel with you. See.
And this is something you feel you've given them, and it's been part of the experience you've had.
I think so. Somehow, I think they were born with it.
Mm.
I never told them my burdens. You know, we never talked a lot about it. But lately, a few years when it started with those interviews and this and that, you know, it came out a little bit. But we never burdened them with it, you know. Never, you know. I never. We tried to actually. Maybe we made a mistake because you didn't keep another language in the house. They know a little bit of Yiddish, but we wanted them to learn English. But kids go on the streets, you know what I mean? Those two who were born here naturally don't have an accent. And those who are not, they don't have an accent either. Kids lose it, you know, they don't have it. They were with kids, you know. My boy had a hard time in school, you know, I put him back in the 1st grade. He went to the 2nd grade in Italy, you know what I mean? But he didn't understand the word English. But now you would think he was born and raised in Pulaski, Tennessee, and that's how he talks. A real Southern, you know.
Well, listen, having gone through your story again, are there any things that you would say? I mean,
well, what I would say is one thing. I tell you, and I'm going to sum it up. I went through fascism. I went through Nazism. I went through kingdoms. I went through all kinds of governments in my lifetime. There is no better country in this world than the United States. The system is the best system in the world. I wish the people would understand and would appreciate it. The American people. You know, I went through the 60s. When they played the Stars, you know, I used to get gospel people, and they used to burn their cars. And my son volunteered and went to Vietnam. And that's how I raised him. And my youngest son went to the army too. Because I told them, you live in the country, and they protect you, and you got to protect your country too. You're proud of it. You know, you got to be proud. You got to have a little patriotism. Young people don't have it. So you got to love it. You got, you know, you have a country where, I mean, I can see a lot of people don't appreciate it because they were born with it, see? They don't know what it means to go through, they don't know what it is to live in Russia. Or they don't know what it means to live under fascism. It's around, you know. You got some. That's the reason you got the freedom. Everybody can talk and say whatever they please. You know. You know, in my days when I was under Stalin, if you would say something against Stalin, you disappeared. See, but you can say anything about Bush. See, and you're still going to be here. See, this is the nicest part about it. It's look. When I came over and stepped on the United States soil, I was a free man. I could go everywhere, anywhere. You're free. You're free. So long you're in the frame of the law, you can do anything you please and do anything you want to. See? So long you're in the frame of the law, you know. There is no better place in the world. And I went through it. This is personal experience. I went through every phase of government there is in this world. I went through. See, in my lifetime, and there is no better country than the United States. You know, freedom is a. That's the reason they have trouble now. You see, in Eastern Europe, they're going to have trouble because after 70 years, they don't know how to handle it. It's not that easy. See, it's going to be trouble. Maybe Czechoslovakia, because they were the only real democratic country in Eastern Europe before the war. See? The rest of them, Romania was always a corrupt country. The soldiers was nothing. He was considered, you know, an officer went by and then he said, clean my boots, you know, really. So, you know, didn't have a cigarette. They used to steal everything.
Mr. Jack Seidner, thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate it a great deal.
You're welcome. Yeah.